So this video will go through the Year 12 AS Maths midterm timed exam paper, which can be found on a previous video. So in terms of going through the answers with regards to question 1, so for the first one with it being worth 1 mark, we should be able to go straight to the answer. So for question AI, the answer there is P equals 3. For question AII, the answer there is Q equals minus 3, and for III it's going to be y equals a half. Now there's really no excuse of getting these questions wrong, because obviously if you've got one of the sort of Casio calculators, particularly the 991EX calculator, if I actually can check the answers by typing in 2 to the power of 3, press equals, I can do 2 to the power of minus 3, and it should tell me what the question is. And obviously likewise, if I did 2 to the power of 0.5, it comes up with 1.14, but obviously that's the same as root 2. So really there's no excuse in terms of getting these questions wrong. Now for B, here what we've got to do is we've got to use our previous answers into terms of working out what x is. So I'll just get rid of that dot to begin with. So here what we've got is we've got root 2 times 2 to the power of x equals 1 over 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace root 2 with 2 to the power of a half times 2 to the power of x equals 2 to the power of minus 3. Now when you are timesing, we can add the powers and the base numbers are the same, so I've got 2, then I've got a half plus x equals 2 to the power of minus 3. So now that the base numbers are the same, these two powers must be equal to each other. So what I've got there is a half plus x equals minus 3, so x equals minus 3.5, and there is the final answer. Now you could obviously have minus 3.5, that would be absolutely fine as well. So moving on to question 2, so again this one refers to surds, and this one's worth a total of 8 marks, almost 10, just over 10% of this paper. So with regards to question A, I was only worth 1 mark, so all we had to do here was simplify root 18, so that becomes root 9 root 2, which then becomes 3 root 2, and there is our final answer. Again, absolutely no excuses of getting this question wrong, because if you type this into this calculator, root 18, press equals, it comes up with the answer straight away. Now with regards to 2, here what we want to do is simplify. So remember that this is not rationalize, this is simplify. So reading the questions carefully, I've got root 8, which can be written as root 4 root 2, which is 2 root 2. I've got root 18, which using the part in part 1 can be written as 3 root 2. And I've got root 32, which is 16 root 2, so that's going to be 4 root 2. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to swap these 3 things into this fraction. So what I get is 2 root 2 at the top over 3 root 2 plus 4 root 2, which then becomes 2 root 2 over 7 root 2. And then what I can then do is cancel out the root 2's, giving me a final answer of 2 over 7. And then moving on to B, so this is where we do have to rationalize the denominator. So here we've got 7 root 2 minus root 3, and this is worth 4 marks, so that should kind of give you an indication of what we need to do. So the first thing we need to do is multiply both the numerator and the denominator by, not that, so let's get rid of that. We need to multiply by 2 root 2 plus root 3 over 2 root 2 plus root 3. Now it's really important that you write this in your working out, because that would be worth your first mark. The next thing we then need to do is multiply this out. Now this is not the nicest, but we can then go through it. So here we've got 7 root 2 minus root 3, and I've got 2 root 2 plus root 3 over 2 root 2 minus root 3, 2 root 2 plus root 3 and then we can then work this out. So multiplying this all out, now let's just see if we can actually use our calculator to do this for us. So let's just working out the numerator. I've got 7 root 2 minus 3, or should I say root 3, press equals, and then we've got to multiply the answer times 2 root 2, scroll across, plus root 3, scroll across, close the bracket, press equals, and that comes up as 20. Let's get back the calculator back. Where are you? There you go. So 25 plus 5 root 6. I think it was. Just double make sure. Yeah. And then if we apply the same for the bottom, here we're going to have, well, this is just using difference of two squares. So I've got 2 root 2, so that'd be 4 root 4 minus root 9. So this is going to be 8 minus 3, which is 5. So I've got 25 plus 5 root 6 over 5. And then obviously I can cancel things down. So I can cancel by 5. So that becomes 1. That becomes 1, giving me a final answer of 5 plus 1 root 6, where m equals, therefore, is going to equal 5, and n is going to equal 6. Now with question 3, so it says the curve has the equation of y equals 2x squared minus x minus 1, and the line has the equation of y equals k, and then 2x minus 3, where k is a constant. So question A says, show that the x coordinate of any point of intersection of the curve and the line satisfies the equation as you can see on the screen. So again, the key thing to remember is whenever the word says intersection, you always want to think simultaneous equations. So what I need to do is I need to combine these two equations together. Now as they're both equal to y, I can make both those equations equal to each other. So let's just start off by writing A. So here I've got 2x squared minus x minus 1, and that equals k 2x minus 3. Now this is only worth 1 mark, so we're going to try and do this as quickly as possible. There is going to be a fair bit of work, but generally speaking it should only take you about a minute to do. So first thing we want to do is expand the bracket. So here I've got 2kx minus 3k, and I've got 2x squared minus x minus 1, and then you want to take all of this all onto one side, because obviously it makes it equal to 0. So I've got 2x squared minus 2kx minus x minus 3k minus 1 equals 0. So from this, what we then do want to do is make sure we've got our positive signs, which again I've not done there. So let me just correct that there. So again, from this you can see that we slowly started to make sense of what we were actually wanting to make it look like. But obviously the key thing here is we want to factorize the things with x. So here what we want to do is factorize this. So if I then go on to factorize that, I get 2x squared minus, and then bracket. Now in terms of a common factor, I've got x. So here I've got 2k plus x, or should I say plus 1 rather, plus 3x minus 1 equals 0, and there I've proved what they've wanted me to prove. So here you can see that yes, there's a fair bit of steps, and for 1 mark it's a bit stingy, but like I said, with a bit of practice hopefully you can go on from there. But the clue is definitely to look at how they want the question written, and you can then work backwards from there. Now in terms of B, what we then need to say, it says that the curve and the line has intersect at 2 distinct points. Now when we say 2 distinct points, so if at 2 distinct points, then we know that b squared minus 4ac has got to be greater than 0. Now this line is really important that you do write this down, because that's usually where the first out of the 3 marks would come from. So from this, what we then want to do is, using this, is we then want to find our coefficient. So a is the coefficient of x squared, which is 2, b is minus 2k plus 1, and c equals 3k minus 1. If you want to put that in brackets, that's absolutely fine. So from this, what we then want to do is incorporate this. So I've got minus 2k plus 1 squared minus 4 lots of 2 3k minus 1, and that's greater than 0. Now the key thing to remember is don't forget to still write the inequality, because examiners are coming a little bit hard on losing marks on presentation. So again, you want to make sure that you're including as much working out as possible. Now in terms of this, again, because I've got a square, that negative is going to be cancelled. So here I've got 4k squared plus 4k plus 1 minus, and I'm going to put square brackets around here. So here I've got 8 3k minus 1, that's greater than 0, and again expanding all of it out, plus 1 minus, and I'm going to have 24k plus 8 is greater than 0, and then if I join all of this up, I get 4k squared minus 20k plus 9 is greater than 0, and again I've proved what they wanted me to do. So again, in terms of where the marks are allocated, make sure you're making some notion of this, making sure you, in terms of your discriminants, that you're substituting the right values in. So I'd probably say your 1 mark comes from there, and then 1 mark for proving this line here. And again, sometimes when you've got a 3-mark question, sometimes you need to require to write 3 lines of working out, and sometimes it's just about how long it should take you to work this out. Now in terms of question BII, so find the possible values of k, what we now need to do is solve the above quadratic. So let me just create a little bit of space from this. Probably okay to use a previous answer. I think that should be enough. Right, so looking at BII, try not to write with a rubber. So BII, I've got 4k squared minus 20k plus 9 is greater than 0. So what I now want to do is solve this quadratic equation. Now you can either get a choice of either using the formula, or you can use the factorizing. Now if you've got one of the Casio calculators, you might be tempted to simply use your calculator to solve this quadratic. However, in the mark scheme they will be requiring you to show some form of method rather than just simply using your calculator to solve. So if we go on to factorizing, a is greater than 0, we get an answer of which one this is going to be? It's going to be 9 and 1, and we want a plus, so we're going to go for minus, minus, and that should work. Yeah, absolutely fine. So here we've got the answers or the solutions of that. If we then go on to solve 2k minus 9, 2k minus 1 equals 0, then k equals either 9 over 2 or a half. Now from this is usually what your calculator would tell you. So you'd probably get 1 mark for using some form of way of solving it, again either using the quadratic formula, which is absolutely fine, and then 1 mark for finding the actual values. Now one thing I'd recommend that you do next is to do a sketch of the polynomial. Now the polynomial for this is going to be a positive parabola, and we've got our 2 roots. So one root is going to be at a half, and one root is going to be at 9 over 2 or 4.5. Now it doesn't really matter what your diagram is, this is just a guide to help you work out the answer. So again, if I just draw a parabola through those 2 points, now I want the values of where it's above 0, so I'm looking for these points here. So in terms of the final answer, it's going to be where k is less than a half, or where k is greater than 9 over 2. And like I said, the key area where students tend to lose a mark is by not doing this sketch, and it really is important. Again, if you look through mark schemes, you'll slowly develop a technique of what the examiner is actually looking for. So let's move on to our next question, which is looking at question 4, which again continues with the theme of inequalities. However, this one's a little bit more straightforward. So with regards to A, the question is just asking us to solve the respective inequalities. So I've got 2, 4x minus 3x is greater than 5 minus 4x plus 2. So again, expanding the brackets, we get 8 minus 6x is greater than 5 minus 4x minus 8. and then what we then want to do is put all the x's on one side, numbers on the other. So I'll take the 6x over to the other side and take the minus 3 over from that side. So let's just neaten this up. Which should be minus 3, sorry. Minus 4x. So I'm going to take the 6x over to this side, the minus 3 over to this side, in which what I end up with is 11 is greater than, and it's going to be 2x. So here I've got 11 over 2 is greater than x, and there is my final answer. And again, I'd probably leave it as a fraction because I don't want to overcomplicate it and do it like that. Now again, the key thing to remember here is the sign of the inequality, or the direction of the inequality. It doesn't matter which way you put it as long as the inequality is pointing at the x. Then moving on to question B, which we'll do on the side here. So we've got 2x squared minus 5x is greater or equal than 12. Now this is slowly starting to look like a quadratic, so the first thing we want to do is make it equal to 0. So I've got 2x squared plus 5x minus 12 is greater or equal to 0. And then what you then want to do is either factorize or go on by using a formula. So if you go on to factorize this, we get 2x minus 3 x plus 4 is greater than 0. And again, if you're not too sure how to factorize, then obviously there's another video that shows you how to do this. And then from this, what we then want to do is solve the quadratic. So here we've got x equals, it's going to be positive 3 over 2 or minus 4. And then from this, what we then want to do is, now we know it's going to be a positive parabola, so I've got one root at minus 4, one root at 3 over 2, and I'm going to do a little sketch from there to help me, and I'm looking for where it's greater than 0, so I'm looking for these values here, what we call the sideburns, and giving us our final answer of that x equals where x is less than minus 4, or less or equal to minus 4, and x is greater or equal than 3 over 2. And again, it's always important you check the inequality in the original question to decide what your inequality should be like in your final answer. Now again, you can check your answer using your calculator. So for example, if you just go on to mode setup, go to I think it's inequality, well there's inequalities yet there, so click enter, and then we've got degree is 2, and then we just find the right function, so here will be the third one, and then just enter the coefficients. In this case it's going to be 2, 5 and minus 12. Press equals, and you can see that it gives you your values, and you can go from there. So it is still important that you don't just simply use your calculator. Use your calculator's way of helping you decide how to check whether you've got the right answer or not. So let's move on to the next question, so question 5. So this is involving coordinate geometry. Now this is pretty much quite a basic question, simply because it just goes through the basics. So each question is worth 2 or 3 marks, so let's have a look at what we get. So with question 5, it says the triangle ABC has the vertices of these 3 coordinates, and the first question is to work out the gradient of AB. So the gradient of AB, again using the formula, so that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So again, substitute the numbers in, so we get 7 over 3, 7 minus 3, 3 minus 1, which simplifies to give you 2, and that there is your gradient, and that's for I. For 2, what we then want to do is prove to show, or hence show, that the angle ABC is a right angle. Now the fact that it says hence is we want to use the sort of proof that the gradient of, so if right angle, then gradient AB times the gradient of BC is going to equal minus 1. So that's really, really important. It's definitely worth writing this as part of your answer to get you for one of the marks at least. So you need to show proof of this anyway. So from this, we already know that the gradient of AB is 2. So the gradient of BC is something I then need to work out. So using that, I get 7 minus 9 over 3 minus minus 1. And we get an answer of minus a half. So then as 2 times minus a half equals minus 1, therefore gradient AB and gradient BC, or should I say, forget the gradients, we don't need to mention that, so therefore AB and BC are perpendicular. Now in terms of question B, or question B, yeah. So here I want to work out the midpoint of AC. Now midpoint of AC is just working out the adding the x ordinates divided by 2, adding the y ordinates divided by 2, so m equals, here in this case, of 0, 6. Now why it's only worth 2 marks is you'll get 1 mark for each correct ordinate that you do correctly. For part 2, then we'll on to say, show that the gradients of A, B and BC are equal. So here we want to work out the distance of AB, and so here we've got square root of, and it's going to be 3 minus 1 squared plus, and it's going to be 7 minus 3 squared, which gives me root 20. I then want to work out the distance of BC, so again square root, and again I'm going to have the x ordinate, so minus 1 minus 3 squared plus 9 minus 7 squared, and again that gives you root 2. And then as these are the same, distance AB equals distance BC, and there you go. And then finally for the third one, it then says, hence find the equation of the line of symmetry for the triangle ABC. Now if we look at the triangle ABC, here is our line of symmetry. So here is our midpoint, which we've already worked out as being 0, 6. So the only thing we then need to do is work out, and again that's B, A and C. So the next thing we then need to do is work out, we'll find the gradient between the line of BM. So the gradient of BM is going to be 7 minus 6 over 3 minus 0, which then gives me a third. And then using y minus y1 equals mx minus x1, or y equals mx plus c, whichever floats your boat, we get the equation of y equals a third x plus 6. And there's your final answer. You could easily have the equation as 3y equals x plus 18, which gives you the exact same answer. It's entirely up to you how you want to write your answer, but both would be accepted. Also, if you want to make it equal to 0, there's no specification in the question that tells you how to write your answer, so as long as you've got some variation of what I've written on the screen, you're going to be absolutely fine. So moving on to question 6, and we're looking at polynomials. So what we need to do is use the factor theorem to prove that x plus 3 is a factor. So with regards to A, so if x plus 3 is a factor, then f of minus 3 should equal 0. So from this, what we then want to do is substitute x equals minus 3 into the function of p of x, I should say, not f of x. That's a nice little way we can just edit that. There we go. Now, you won't lose any marks for that. I would personally add pretty harsh if you were to lose marks on swapping p's and f's, but it's always good and important that you do use whatever's written in the question. So here what we then want to do is we've got minus 3 cubed minus 13 lots of minus 3 minus 12. It does equal 0, so therefore x plus 3 is a factor. And there you go. Now again, the key thing that a lot of students tend to forget is writing this statement. And it really is important. It's not just a case of substituting minus 3 and then hence therefore, and also don't forget to write this statement here down as well. Don't just simply write down what this is, because that unfortunately won't get you 2 marks, but it does seem to be a very big misconception that a lot of students tend to do. So moving on to B, what we then want to do is factorize or express p of x as a product of 3 linear factors. So we've already found one factor, so we've got x plus 3, and we then need to find the second one. So I've got ax squared plus bx plus c. Now if you're not too sure how to do this, there is a video on my channel that shows you how to factorize polynomials. So again, what I'm going to do is expand the brackets. So what I get is ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx, and then 3ax squared plus 3bx squared plus 3c, and then join those two things together. So I've got ax cubed plus bracket b plus 3a x squared plus c plus 3b x, I don't know why I've got an x squared there, so let me just get rid of that, and plus 3c. And again, from that, what I then want to do is compare it to the original equation. So here I've got x cubed plus 0x squared minus 13x minus 12. So from this, what I then want to do is compare the coefficients. So here I've got that a is going to equal 1. From that, b plus 3a has got to equal 0, so therefore b is going to equal minus 3. And then using the last one, I've got 3c equals minus 12, so c is going to equal minus 4. So from this, what we've then got is to now substitute both those two things in and substitute my values of a, b, c in. I get x plus 3, and then I'm going to get x squared minus 3x minus 4. And if I then go on to factorize this, I get x plus 3, x minus 4, and x plus 1. And there is my final answer. Now when we get to question 7, this is more of a sampling question. So the question reads, Kevin is a principal of a college. He wishes to investigate types of transport used by students to travel to college. There are 3,200 students in the college, and Kevin decides to survey 60 of them. Describe how he could obtain a simple random sample of size 60 from the 3,200 students. Now in this question, it's obviously based around sampling and slightly different to how your teacher may have told you to answer these types of questions. The first thing to notice is that it's already told you what sampling method they want you to use, so it really is important that you follow these steps. So typically, if they just said he wants to survey 60 students, then you'd have to state what sampling method you're going to choose, but unlike those, in this particular question, it's told you which sampling method to choose. So with regards to these sampling questions, you can either complete this complete the question and gain the 4 marks by using 4 distinct points, or you could spend half a page or a whole page describing exactly how you would go about completing the sample. Now that's entirely up to you, but again, just be mindful of the time, and you want to make sure you're picking up the key points. So the key points on this are that you want to give each student number from 0001 to 3200. And again, you may want to suggest how they would do that. So you may say, well, get the class registry, go to the admin office, get a list of all the students, and allocate each student a number from 1 to 3,200. Now you don't need to go into specifics of does the list need to be in alphabetical order, does it need to be in terms of classes, let's say like for example class A, class B, class C, so there might be some distinct order. You probably don't want to focus too much on biasness with regards to how you select the data, and the reason for that is because of step 2. Now with step 2, once you've allocated a student a number, you then want to use a random number generator either on a calculator or on a computer. Now again, at this stage you might be very tempted to write down the actual steps or the Excel formula to actually type that in, or what buttons you press on your calculator to work that out. So for example, if I load up the calculator, if I type in shift and then let's get rid of the mode, so switch it back up. What am I doing? So mode and then option 1. So if I select shift, rands hashtag, and then times 3200, press equals, and what it will do is it'll give me a random decimal number between each of those numbers. And again, so that's how I do it. Now I don't really need to write those specifics in the actual answer, but again, it's something that you may in the heat of the moment actually then decide to do. Now whenever we get these questions, you always want to state a potential problem and how you then go about resolving it. Now it doesn't need to be like a first world problem, it can be something very, very small, but as long as you're identifying a potential problem and how you go about solving it, that's all they're asking for. So in this, one problem you may find is if a number comes up more than once. And again, so that's a potential problem that comes up. What do? Well, you just simply ignore it and move on to the next number. And then what you then want to state is you stop until you've selected 60 different numbers. And then the final mark is you then select those numbered students to complete the survey. And that is it. Now any additional information, as long as it's not counterproductive to what you've stated, will get you the full mark. So if you were to mention any biasness, again it's excessive, not really needed, but you shouldn't really lose any marks. And the only time you would lose marks is if it then becomes it counters what you've already mentioned. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question then looks at this. So again, it's to deal with quartiles and medians. So it says that Lizzie is a receptionist at a dental practice, was asked to keep a weekly record of the number of patients who failed to turn up for an appointment. Obviously one of the biggest pet peeves of any receptionist, I'm sure, in the medical sort of profession. Her records for the first 15 weeks are as follows, and you've got the list of numbers there. So unfortunately Lizzie forgot to record the actual values of 2 of the 15 weeks, values I should say. So she records them as A as B, and the only thing she does remember is that A was less than 10 and B was greater than 40. And question A says calculate the median and the interquartile range of the 15 values. Now the first thing you want to do is order the numbers, which can take a bit of time and also a bit of patience as well. Now when you are dealing with this, you know you've got 15 numbers, which again is the key thing here. So what I'd recommend that you do is, now I'm kind of already pre-done the numbers, is not pretend as if you're playing hangman, but just make 15 dashes. And then from the 15 dashes you then want to start filling in the numbers. So we know that A is the smallest because that's A is less than 10 as Lizzie has told us, and B is going to be the biggest number. So what you should therefore have is the list of numbers there, and that will probably be worth the 1 mark at least. So from this, now because you're working with the median and the interquartile range, you may be very, very tempted to use your calculator, because your calculator can give you the values for this. Now yes, that can be fine, but I would say once you've ordered the data, which is definitely going to be needed on your answer sheet, is then spotting this. So our median value is the middle number, so here we've got A, the median equals 26, and then the interquartile range, well, if I find out the middle number between these numbers, here I've got 18 and I'm going to end up with 34 as my upper quartile. So this here is my Q1, this is my Q2, and you can see without using a calculator, without faffing about through the menus, I've got those values straight away. So Q1 is 18, Q3 is 34, so the IQR is going to be 34 minus 18, and again if I just simply work that out and double make sure, we get an answer of 60, and there is my 2 answers that they've requested. Now for question B, it says give a reason for these data. So we've got worth 2 marks, so you get 1 mark for each one. So it says that for A, the mode is not the appropriate measure of the average. Now again, with regards to this, now if I just get rid of all these markings because it's a little bit confusing, I'll talk you through how we actually do this. So in terms of the mode, now you can see straight away, we know that it's not a case of, even though we don't know the value of A and we don't know the value of B, we know definitely it's not going to be a repeat of any of those numbers. So you can't really go along the common answer for this particular question by saying, well, because we don't know what A and B are, we don't know what the mode is. Because we know what A is, we know it's less than 10, and we know that B is greater than 40. So there's going to be no duplicates of any of the existing numbers that we've got. Now the 2 modes we've got are 25 and 37. Now for this, the count of 25 and 37, yes, we've got 2 modes, which is never ideal, and also the 2 modes are quite separated in terms of the values of those two. So there is a difference between 37 and 25. Now the also thing is you want to mention the fact that 2 doesn't really stand out from that list. So yes, hypothetically, the mode is the numbers that appear the most, and 25 and 37 do appear the most. However, there's only 1 of each of the other numbers, so as we said, 2 doesn't really stand out from the list, so you could say it's quite sparse. So here we've got, so anything along the lines of that you've got 2 modes, which is not helpful, and 2 is a bit sparse from 1, because like I said, it doesn't really stand out. A mode of like 3, 5, 10 would definitely stand out from a list of 15, so there you go from there. Now in terms of part 2, it says the standard deviation cannot be used as a measure of spread. Well, the reason for that is because in order to work out the standard deviation, you need to know all the exact values. So because A and B are unknown, you cannot calculate the standard deviation. So that's why it's those. So again, something along those lines would be absolutely fine. But again, the key thing you want to mention is the fact that you're not trying to prove what the mode is, because it does say that it says not and cannot. So you want to say why you can't use those two values rather than why you can. So moving on to the next question, question 9. So this looks at mean and standard deviation. Now in terms of this, the examiners, although you've got sophisticated calculators that allow you to work out the mean and standard deviation from either a list of data or tabulated data, they do chuck in these types of questions. So it's really important you remember the formulas of how you work out the standard deviation. Now standard deviation is calculated by doing sigma x squared over n minus the mean squared. And the mean squared is going to be sigma x over n squared. So if I then work out those values, so I'm going to use these values in the question, substitute the numbers in, so I've got 19412 divided by 10 minus 364 over 10 squared, and that's all square rooted. I should get the answer of 24.8. Now looking at question 10, which focuses on probability, the key thing we note here is that this involves independent probabilities. So it's really important that you read the question carefully and you know which probability applies to which. So here, excuse my Welsh on this one, says David, Eli and Fabio are members of an amateur cycling club that holds a time trial each Sunday during the summer. The independent probabilities that David, Eli and Fabio take part in one of these trials is 0.6, 0.7 and 0.8 respectively. So first thing we know is that the probability of D equals 0.6, the probability of E is 0.7, and the let's just get that a little bit neater, and there we go, and the probability of F is 0.8. So the first question then says find the probability that on a particular Sunday during the summer none of the three cyclists take part. So for part A, I'm working out the probability that I don't have D, and I don't have E, and I don't have F. So from this, what I then need to do is multiply the sort of exhaustive probability of this. So the probability that David doesn't take part is going to be 0.4 times Eli not taking part, which is 0.3, times Fabio not taking part, which is 0.2, and if I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of 0.024. Then for B, it says Fabio is the only cyclist that takes part, so this is a probability that D doesn't take part and Eli doesn't take part, but Fabio does. So here I'm going to have 0.4 times 0.3 times 0.8, and that gives me a probability of 0.096. And that's where you get 2 marks. Now where the 2 marks are gained from is by you showing you're working out and then getting the final answer. So moving on to C, so here we want exactly one cyclist to take place. So the probability of exactly one is either going to be the probability that David takes part and Eli and Fabio don't take part. We're looking at David doesn't take part, Eli does, and Fabio doesn't, and David doesn't, Eli doesn't, but Fabio does. So what we want to do is we want to work out each of these three probabilities, and then we're going to add them all up. So for the first one, I'm going to just show you its sort. So it's going to be 0.6 times 0.3 times 0.2, which gives me an answer of 0.036. For the second one, we've got 0.4 times 0.7 times 0.2, which gives me 0.056, and we've already worked out the third one, which is 0.096. And so all I then need to do now is add those three probabilities up, in which I get 0.188, and there is my final answer for C. Now moving on to D. So D then says either one or two of the three cyclists take part. So I've already worked out what the probability of only one takes part, which is here. So the next thing I need to then do is work out what's the probability of only two of them taking part. So the prob of two taking part is either going to be the probability of D and slight error there. Let's try and be a little bit neater. So I've got D and E and not F. I've got D and not F and E, and I'm going to have not D, E and F. And these are three probabilities that I then need to work out. So working the three probabilities out, so to work out this one I'm going to have to do 0.6 times 0.7 times 0.2, which gives me an answer of 0.084. This probability is going to give me 0.144. And finally for this one it's going to give me 0.224. Now if I add each of those three probabilities up together, I'm going to get an answer of 0.452. I don't know why I've wrote that because I'm getting ahead of myself. 0.52. So for part D, what I then need to do is then work out, so the probability of 1 or 2 taking part is going to be equal to 0.188, which is the probability of only one taking part, plus the probability, because I want or, of 2 taking part, give me a final answer of 0.64, and there is your final answer. So there are different variations you can do, and obviously the amount of working that you do is going to be key. Now in terms of the actual notation of probability that you're doing, that can vary. You don't have to use the symbols, but certainly the number and the calculations need to be the same. Now you may be doing some different variations of how you actually calculate and conjure up the probability that you can see on the screen, but as long as you're getting the final answer and you're showing some mathematical support of how you got those numbers rather than just simply writing it or using your calculator, it's you should get the full marks for that particular question. And then finally, moving on to question 11, the number of pots of yogurt X consumed per week by adults in Milton is a discrete random variable with a probability distribution given by the table below. And in this question we're asked to find the probability of where X is 3 to 6 inclusive of 3. So basically what I need to do here is just add the probabilities of the numbers of X that are valid in the inequality, which are 3, 4 and 5, and if I add those three probabilities I get the correct answer of 0.26 for 1 mark. Now the official mark scheme of this paper can be found in the description below. However, the grade boundaries are an estimate and you can see are on the screen right now.